And we are go. All right. Well, welcome to Freedom Friday. And you are still not free, but maybe you'll be freer after an hour with us here. Where are we, Sharif? Tell me where we're at.
Uncle Bobbie's historic Germantown section of Philadelphia, down by the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman, William Still, hundreds of black folks seeking freedom, seeking community, seeking humanity, and their dignity. So this is where we are.
What's the crime rate?
Okay, see, he's starting violence already. First thing in the morning, he's starting violence.
Unbelievable.
Well, listen, don't listen to Ray, but we have 3 of the 8 black hands. We are together today. We are talking about book bans, CRT, and it's apropos to being in a black bookstore owned by a national black correspondent who speaks very deeply and scholarly to the issues of black folks. So this is a great place to be to do it. I actually just being here, I felt like peace. Like look at all this knowledge around us, right? 2 or 3 rooms of wait, see, and people just be straggling in off the street,
Video bombing,
all up in the video, all up in the video, representing. We got Philly, we got the Twin Cities, we got Long Island, we got Oakland in the house,
Sister City to Philly.
So we're doing live and well, bro. Let's kick this off.
Yeah.
Nationally, there are people that are changing the curriculum by removing Black history items, removing books that are specific to Black people, removing even Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, books about Ruby Bridges. Those are just some of the more kind of popularized ones we've heard about. What we haven't heard about, or what we're not hearing enough about, is how much deeper than that is going. I'll give you a for instance. Texas, there's a legislator who put 500 books on the list, 500, that he wanted to review at the state level in the legislature and review them to be able to remove them from the curriculum. 500.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to give you a guess at how many of those books were by people of color and about people of color and the life of people of color.
Yeah.
And you know what's the trip about that is, in Texas, 1/4 of the students are white.
Wow.
Only 1/4.
Wow.
So you have a
How do they have that
legislature.
much power?
That is today's show. Ray just said it. How do they have this much power?
It's the opposite of what you're going to learn today. It's like, y'all not going to learn
You are
today.
not. No, you're gonna learn today, but not that.
Not that.
Not that. Not about yourself, right?
Yeah.
What do y'all think about this? You've heard me talk about this endlessly. I'm starting to feel like a crazy person. Do you feel like I'm making too much of this? There are people who just say, like, basically, I expect it. This is racism. You know, this is America's racist, whatever. Or are you more like in my camp where I'm like, no, this is different. This is laws passing.
I would say, yes, we should expect it. We should expect like white supremacy to constantly evolve, seek to gain more power, to coalesce, and to find issues and fissures within our movement. Like that's what the enemy does. And so if we look at white supremacy as their continued battle cry, like this is an ongoing war. 500 years, like it has not stopped. And I think sometimes we look at these battles as like, disconnected. I look at it as a 500-year war that's been waged against people of color through white supremacy. And this is the next iteration of it. But just like we should expect that, we should also expect the resistance to come together. And with the level of urgency, because there are state laws, because there are fines, because there's people can get fired and removed and lose their certification as educators. Like, we can't be lackadaisical about this stuff. You lackadaisical about quicksand. Next thing you know, you're under.
I was about to say you did. This felt like quicksand, but it didn't feel so bad for a while.
It's like kind of warm. I needed a bath anyway, so it's all right. It's like that massage, and it's cheaper. The next thing you know, you're going under. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you ever see that prehistoric?
I'm sure I didn't, because I'm not
You
that
did.
old.
No, I'm
Go
sure
ahead,
you
bro.
did.
Go ahead.
They captured some skeletons of a
Yeah.
mammoth that was stuck. They theorized it was stuck in a quicksand.
Yeah.
Saber-toothed tiger jumped on his back to eat it. It was like, oh, you're in distress. Let me jump on you and eat it.
What?
That saber-toothed tiger never moved, and he ended up getting stuck in there too. You know what I mean? So they have this fossilized version, but that's the kind of thing. Saber-toothed tiger was just like, it's not that bad. Let me just get. Next thing you know, he was dead too, right? And so I think I don't think we have enough urgency for this situation, because I think too often I don't hear where's our black organizations?
Not
We
just
talked
our
about
black
this last night,
organizations.
you know?
I see all these
Families,
white
everybody.
suburban white moms coming to school board yelling
Don't
and
say that,
screaming.
man. You're gonna get canceled.
Nah, I'm uncancelable, bro. Like, because the truth will
We're
never
gonna
be
cancel
canceled.
them.
Right. The truth is a mini series. It'll never be canceled, bro. But to this point though, like, where's everybody else showing up at them same meetings? Right. I am sure wherever those meetings are, I am sure within the neighborhood or within that group, like there are people of color parents. There are parents of color, right? Like, but I never see them I never see them come forward.
Yeah, but that could be an access thing too, because
Access.
at the time in which they're doing those meetings,
Yeah.
you know, folks got to work.
Bro, this is Loudoun County. This is where the black people have something. This isn't.
Where's Loudoun County? Where is it?
Virginia.
Virginia, you know, places like that.
Well,
where,
actually,
like, you know,
no, you had a parent from Loudoun County that did that CRT bit or whatever. She didn't know what the hell she was talking about.
right. That's when we do have black folks,
Yeah.
middle class black folks in those areas show up. They sound just like the other ones,
Well,
which is crazy sometimes, you know.
because they get so enamored with being adjacent
Accepted.
to white people.
That's right.
Right? And
That's
I think
right.
that they try to show up that way. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's sickening.
They're like the saber tooth in the quicksand. Right. I don't know what that meant. You said it. I didn't know what that meant.
You don't know what it
I'll
meant
see
either.
you later.
I'm gonna keep
But
working on it.
assimilation ain't just for recent
keep working on
immigrants.
it.
Assimilation is for other folks too who feel like, you know, my proximity to whiteness is going to improve my life. It's going to improve my children's life. It's going to, you know, generationally, the more we can get to that stage,
Yeah.
you know, then I'll be better and the world will be better, right? And like
That's
it's
unfortunate.
it's a mental constriction of brainwashing and, like, you know, internalized racism
Mhm.
where you feel like, you know what, that is better for me not to be who God created me. It's better to be what these white folks created. This image white folks created is better than what God created.
Well, with the hate that they spew, right, and the damage that they leave behind, right, that they've always left behind, I couldn't imagine wanting to be adjacent to white folks and making myself great by being that way. Nah, man, it's too much black energy. This is Black History Month.
I mean, there are some benefits. You listen to benefits. There's some benefits.
All right, so talk to me about the benefits. I want to hear this.
Well, I mean, you know, they got Whole Foods.
Hey, listen,
You know,
Whole Foods is not
They got
based
good
off
credit,
of color,
you
bro.
know, they
Whole
got-
Foods is just access to good food, man. Trader Joe's, like all
Trader
the,
Joe's.
Listen, I have this working
Hagar
theory.
pants
Yeah, I have this
that aren't too tight.
working theory.
Yes.
Don't
If you
come at us
live
for it.
close
Don't come
to
at
Whole
us for it.
Foods or
Permanent
live
crease
close to
pants,
Trader Joe's,
you know?
you made it.
You've seen the downside. You're not seeing the upside.
I think it
You
goes
know,
back to
is
what
their
we
coffee
talked about
better?
before.
Their coffee's better.
When it comes back to before, everybody doesn't want to end white supremacy.
They steal it from our
They want to
countries,
improve
but-
their
Absolutely.
They want to
That
improve
African,
their space
bean.
within it. They want to improve their conditions,
position.
their positions. within it.
Yes. Yes.
Like that's because ultimately it's like power. How do I get a little bit more power?
yeah.
Right. And so and some of it is just like internalized. Like they were like if you were brainwashed in a particular way. And a lot of times we talk about brainwashing propaganda. It's always about like, you know, some foreign entity. Like, in Korea or in Russia or in China, like they're the only entities and governments and so on forth that use propaganda. You know what I mean? It's like those places, right? It's always like this othering.
Yeah.
And have you focused on that and not realizing like everything you're ingesting is propaganda.
Oh, we're swimming in a sea of daily propaganda. Everything
Anti-black propaganda.
Anti-black. We're in the matrix. We're in the cracker matrix.
Oh,
and
wow.
like
I disavow.
Huh? What?
Listen.
What?
Listen.
Oh,
So tell me more about
what
this.
did I say? You don't know about the cracker matrix?
I actually have heard about
I don't want to know nothing about that.
Okay.
I'm good.
Well, bro, listen.
I only know these guys on Sunday.
In the cracker matrix, you think like you Neo, right?
Mhm.
And you are told all day long before you know you're in the cracker matrix that all of this knowledge that we are sitting in, all of this is somehow illegit. This is all supposed to make you feel this is crazy stuff. This is crazy talk whatnot. So we're
Even
like
if it exists at all, some don't even know or acknowledge that there is something like this.
No, but you're talking about that group of people who see their freedom in being adjacent to their own oppression and their oppressors, right? So they are fully matricized, right? Because they have actually come to just love their position. But I will say this. Let me back up for a second. Well, let me say two things. First of all, because I'm gonna get heated about this cracker situation.
Yeah,
right. So y'all know where cracker comes from? Do you know the origins of cracker?
I do.
From the whip.
Yeah, from the whip.
From the whip.
Yeah.
The people who crack the whip on you, the whip makes a sound, a cracking sound.
Yeah.
Right. The NFL has a whip. Right. Government has a whip.
Yeah.
Schools have a whip. You start thinking
Schools
the wrong
might have
thoughts.
the biggest whip.
Schools have the woo.
We knew this was gonna happen.
Yeah,
in Philly.
That's the sounds of Philly.
Yeah.
I like it. It's like I love the sound of Philly in the morning.
Yeah,
right?
yes,
100%.
So, anyways, back to crackers. So, the cracking of the whip, huh?
Just the way you deliver it's just flowing so eloquently.
It's not eloquent, bro. It's just like listen, I'm calling things as I see them,
Okay.
right? So the cracking of the whip is the sound. That's why you call people a cracker. They're the ones who make that sound that puts you back into shape, right? You start thinking the wrong thing, pop, you get whipped back into shape. You get the cracking of that whip. You start acting the wrong way, walking the wrong way, singing the wrong way, dancing the wrong way, talking the wrong way, reading the wrong way. Whatever you do wrong, there is a universal system in place to make you hear that crack, and then you snap right back into the spot.
Get back in line.
Right, get back in line. You might lose your job, you might lose your house, you might lose your standing, you might lose your funders, you might whatever it is, you might lose it, right? Oh, wow. That's the crack, right? So when you talk about these people in Loudoun County or whatever, where we say, okay, you done got bougie, you just want to increase your position in life. Here's one thing where you might give them some grace. White supremacy gives you a handful of choices in life. One is death. Mm-hmm. So if you want to keep it as real as you possibly can keep it, you're gonna die. Yeah, right. You could be Malcolm or Martin, you're gonna die. Of course, right. Yep. You could be literate or illiterate or whatnot, you're gonna die unless you start complying in some ways that keeps you alive. The ultimate way to benefit and be kept alive is to let all this go and fully just join the other team. Like to Christian Walker yourself out of it, to Herman Cain your way out of it, to Candace Owens your way
Herman
out
Cain
of it.
Is dead.
So, oh yeah, it is deep. How'd he die again? COVID. Ah! Anyways, I'm sorry, did it come out
at the 1 million people that have died from COVID, but he did kind of ask for it by going to a Trump rally.
Well, and saying that it wasn't real, trying to tell people
with no mask. So yeah, you can't really for him.
All right,
even though he.
All right, I done got myself in a lot of trouble this morning. Y'all jump in and get yourselves in trouble so I get myself out.
I'll jump in and not get in trouble. But it's funny that you're talking about this whip cracking thing, right? Because if I'm thinking to myself about the 80s and how it went from whip cracking to actual crack and how crack kind of decimated the black community. That's a deep goal.
Okay, all right, yeah, I see you.
That's a realism.
That's like the dinosaurs. That's like the dinosaurs.
No, but seriously though, I think every book in Uncle Bobbie's would be burned if these white folks had their ways.
He would get a license or whatever to open this place in some of these space,
But I'm sitting and I'm thinking about it from from the folks that are out burning these books. There are kids in book deserts. There's kids in the inner city that would love to have these books. So instead of burning these books, why don't you send them to us, right? And let us distribute these books.
There ain't no book deserts, bro.
You said there are no book deserts?
Yeah.
Explain why you think no?
That's just not, bro. I'm sorry.
It's an access issue though, right? Because the things that you have access to in a suburban school district are totally different from the things that you have access to in the city. The funding.
There are food deserts, there are equity deserts, there are opportunity deserts. But one of the things that we have, we're in an information society. Information is like free. Ignorance is a choice at this point.
That's true.
Like ignorance is really like a choice. And listen, I see people. I love libraries. And
free library down the street.
As a matter of fact, cities like this have world-class libraries.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can get a free world-class education in Philadelphia. Honestly, I love libraries so much. I think it's like the one thing we do right as a society. Yeah. And I come to like cities like this, and I'm jealous. Like we have a couple of good libraries where I'm at. But like one or two, you come to a city like this, man, and it's just like the access to free information. You don't need a school in some ways. Yeah, that's gonna sound bad. It's gonna sound wrong, but in some ways, I don't think that let's say you homeschooled and you didn't want to use a school at all, right? Mm-hmm. And you were going to use just the resources in Philadelphia that are available to you, right? Access to historic sites, access to primary documents, access to whatever. Philly is rich in a way.
Philly might be one of the best places to homeschool your kids.
To home.
Yeah. one of the best places to homeschool
Say
your
it
kid
again.
might be
Might be
Philadelphia.
in Philadelphia. Yes, to take them completely out of the cracker matrix. Right?
It went from the
Yeah,
whip
I don't-
on the plantation to the Matrix.
Listen, I don't want to breeze over the idea. Like I do agree with Ray as far as like yes, information and access and things like that. Absolutely, is way more accessible than maybe before. And I want to also just that equity piece that come out. I mentioned this earlier. Like the library at 52nd and Lancaster has been closed for a decade. Right, and like that's right in the middle of the black neighborhood. That joint was closed down, never reopened. It was like, oh, budget cuts, like never reopened, right? And so if I go to the suburb, like my access to the wide and you can even see it within the city. I don't even want to go across county lines. Going to the northeast, like a section of like what that rec center in that space looks like, and then what it looks like in other places, what the library looks like. The same way you imagine like what the schools, what the institutions look like for schools filled with black people. That's the same parallel and the same institutional mindset and framing that the other things look like. So yes, you can go down, across from your hotel, the main library. Yeah, that joint is dope, right? But then also, how many of those if you're a black child going in, black parent going in, are who's choosing those books for that library? It ain't gonna look like this in most of those places. I don't care Philly or Ogle, wherever, right? Yeah. It ain't gonna look like this. Yeah. Why doesn't it? Right? They should have more access, right? And I love the library. So like, my Aunt Mariam, she would order, when she became disabled, had her stroke, she would order library books. You know what I mean? And they would come, deliver, she'd read them, send them back. Like I thought that kind of access is fantastic. But we also have to recognize, and I forget, I used to know this stat, but like, a very small percentage of authors right now are black and brown, telling their own story, right? We talked about this before. You, as a child, you're more likely to see a talking bear and a talking car than a character that looks like you. So crazy. Yeah, right. So like, crazy. So all of these things, and the folks who are in a position of power, who are owning that creation, they'll say, "Well, we use the black voice for that rock." We use the black voice for the bear, so you are included. We ain't gonna give you a character, but sound like? Your voice you could be the voice. Yo, dog, I'm a rock. That's exactly what it sounds. But like I recognize that tone. That's crazy. I think that's we arrived, right? Like,
okay, well, let me ask you this question, because you have cities like this where you just said all that, and you ask, okay, well, who's in charge then? Who makes those decisions of what gets open, what's get closed? And now you talking. Well, I mean, you talking about a city that's run by black folks, a city that has black money, black power, black collective power in ways that a lot of places in the rest of the country don't have that level of like control of their own kind of environments. And you shut down libraries, and you don't have any power over who puts what books in the library, whatever, right?
Not only that,
I mean, there's a lot of cities that have that exact same political apparatus. Black top, black bougie middle class situation. Some of your talented 10 folks or whatnot. So what's happening?
Well, let me tell you this one thing. I remember there was a mayor who came to a meeting and said, "The brothers run this city." And I looked at that like, do they really? You know what I mean? Because the way he was describing it, like in these positions, these formal positions, when you peel that back and you actually say, like, who actually makes decisions for cities? First of all, we're the billionaires. We're the Fortune 500 companies, right? Like there's, even if they're behind the scenes, you have to recognize that there are decisions and meetings and all those kind of things where they're dictating like, hey, yo, dog, and this is what's actually going down.
This is like closed libraries though?
Closed libraries is another function of, we talk about like urban centers, right?
Yeah.
If I'm in Harrisburg and I'm voting for your budget, I don't care about your library at 52nd and Lancaster. Yeah. I'm cutting that. And so sometimes people are in these decisions like it's either this or that, and both of them are bad, right? And so then they get that particular blame. But you also have to look what's behind that very poor decision that they are forced to make. So then they're the ones that's getting, dragged down the street and tarred and feathered, theoretically, right? And it was literally like, you have $1,000. Do you close that clinic or do you close the library? People don't know about, and I think, that's what policymakers have to also be more transparent about. Like, hey, I think there's a lack of transparency, a lack of trust, lack of community, lack of engaging community to say, hey, y'all, we only got 50 million. Here are all the things, because in the community like Philly, what you hear is like, yo, you better give the city, the district more schools, more money. You give them more money. Hey, you better keep the libraries open. All right, you better keep the health clinic open. You better do you know what our budget is?
I feel like you give them too much grace.
No, not too much grace. I'm just saying, like, these are the realities of like what's happening, and you still got to hold folks accountable.
Here's a reality.
I mean, I suffered from this. I lost $1 million at my school at Shoemaker. We lost $1 million. $1 million, like from one year to another.
I got
what was I supposed to do?
I mean,
not cut anything.
Your governor actually can make a lot of difference what happens in the city. So I get that. Like what happens at your state capital, especially like a lot of states hate their biggest city. Like
because they're probably more black and more brown.
Right. Yeah. So in a lot of states, you'll have like a city that's an urban center, and then a state that's whiter than the city, and they hate that city, right? So the governor has a lot
despite
of
the economic benefits.
And you have people who are getting elected to these offices that are getting elected by real estate developers, and they will tell you privately, all that stuff y'all talking about, whatnot, is actually not my main concern. We let mayors off the hook a lot of times on doing the right thing for the community. Sometimes it's because they're in a position where they don't have the power to like fight the whole world, and sometimes it's just because they're about that life.
I agree. They're behind the scene. They're real estate group. Like that's a power group. Right?
And they're playing golf, and they're playing golf with that group, and they're having martinis for lunch with that group, and all that type of stuff. And
then you add the talented 10th, you add the constricted mindset, the anti-blackness, the anti-poverty, the anti blah 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 blah, and then it's a face. I
don't think y'all know how much power y'all have in Philly, right? Because y'all in a swing state, right? And then the vote from Philly usually can kind of sway an election. We've seen that happen in the last 2 elections. Like you guys have a lot of voting power here.
And you said black people don't vote. Now you're saying we got.
I never said that.
No, I'm just teasing.
All right. So leveraging the weight of your vote, I think, can get you more than if you galvanize together as black folks in Philadelphia and say, hey, here are our terms. Here's what we need for you to get our vote, and then hold politicians accountable after they get the vote.
I think black folks love promises. For the most part, so
everybody loves promises. Don't put that on black people.
No, I do.
Yeah, but some people's promises don't get broken.
Exactly. Some people love promises because they know they're going to come to fruition.
Yes.
Other people are constantly sold this idea of hope,
and
heaven, and future, and one day.
And that's how they keep your ass in these bad schools by promising you that they're going to get better. Right.
That's how you get people signing up for Weight Watchers.
What?
Yeah.
What?
The promise. The promise.
Yeah, but that works.
Every when does that work?
Works, man.
Weight Watchers works for who, bro? Listen, every January.
Like I was on that, but go ahead, say more. What is it?
Every January 1st, there's a promise industry.
Yeah.
Every January 1st.
Peloton is a promise.
Peloton, and now their stock is crashing because everybody got them damn expensive door stops in their basement now, like I got. And then you got Weight Watchers, and you got Spanx.
What's a Spanx?
You know what Spanx are,
Nah, bro.
Spanx is the promise of moving out your lumps. You think, and that's what $2, $4, $5 billion industry. The promise industry.
You know why I don't know what that is? Because I'm in shape.
See, that's why you should not be in this discussion. That's a good reason for you to leave, right? Like this is what you got the suit for everybody.
Everybody's not part of it.
Afro yoga man over here, like I'm in shape. Of course you are. You be stretching every day, and doing dumb shit like that. So I'm in shape. Right?
Look, I don't think we should disrespect the goat yoga and all that stuff that he does.
Oh yeah, we should disrespect it. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Goat yoga.
He want a goat on his back. Let him have a goat.
This one wants to milk a goat, and this one wants to do yoga with.
I want to eat that joint. Curry goat, bro. Like,
really?
Well, after we milk it, let's curry that joint up. You know what I'm saying?
Wait, and you can put its own cheese on it,
bro. Listen, you gotta take care of this and use the entire. I brought some goat milk home to the kids. Were like, I ain't drinking it. I'm like, it's milk. Like what?
It's not the same thing.
It's actually better than cow milk. But go ahead. I don't want to.
Anyways, all I'm saying about that is don't blame it on black people for wanting promises. Everybody wants promises. They want the promises. Americans spend millions of dollars every year, billions of dollars on promises.
And it probably came out. We're not blaming people
so.
for having, hope and promise. What I'm saying is some people's promise, particularly for Black and brown communities, are consistently undelivered.
That's true.
Well, we're getting one though.
That's called Democrats.
No. See, and I'm not a Democrat, but I'm going to cape for them for 1 second. Right?
Ooh, this should be good.
So,
all right, come on, Republican.
Cape
I got to hear this. Let's hear it.
Biden loses the first 2 primaries. Gets down to South Carolina, gets Jim Clyburn.
Okay.
And Jim Clyburn makes him make a whole lot of promises, right? It's like, okay, so what can you do in order to win the Black vote in South Carolina? Well, one thing you can do is you can make the next Supreme Court opening be one for a Black jurist, right? Okay. And so now that promise is going to come true because he held his feet to the fire in terms of like, all right, you need to make sure that the next person that is open on the Supreme Court is a Black woman. But then my question for y'all is that there were several openings during the Obama administration in which he could have had a Black woman jurist. He didn't do it.
Why? Did he nominate any?
Why not?
I don't know.
Why you hating on Obama?
I'm not. I'm just asking a question.
Why you hating on Black Jesus? I don't know what your problem is.
I thought that was Michael Jordan.
No, is it Michael Jordan?
That's what I thought. I mean, at least that's who they.
What y'all shooting for?
Pop culture.
Is this the what is this? The sitcom? What's going on?
You want throwing violence at Black Jesus? Like wow. I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, I couldn't even answer that, but probably for a whole lot of other reasons. First of all, how many of his nominations at all got to the next level, got approved, right? Like, and so maybe that was one of the things. Like, oh, I know they're not going to, so I'm going to go with what I mean. And we also had to know, like, people like Obama are also centrist, right? Like, they're trying to, like, what's going to, how do I navigate this field and get there? So that's neither here nor there, but like,
he didn't want to be a Black president.
He wanted to be. He said that. Y'all, but again, back to the hope, like, but he would. I know he's saying that, but he's just saying that to get elected. Once he gets elected, then it's good. Like,
but he did nothing. My taxes were better under the first Bush.
Oh my gosh! Why does everything go back to your taxes, your college loan, your like, you know what I mean? Like this how your lawn right is mowed, you know what I mean? Like,
bro, there's a few books in here you should probably read. Let's pull some
maybe, but I don't think I'm not. It's no self-hatred here. I love me. Listen, I love Black people.
I will say this
about the collective, bro.
The collective. I didn't agree with everything he did, but I will say this much. After the 4 years of nonsense that you just saw with what came after him, I should have gave you a good appreciation for him. Number one. Number two, very diverse cabinet, and like everybody was getting put on left and right in his administration. You're right about the Supreme Court. That didn't make any sense. But he put the first Latina right on the Supreme Court or whatnot. And we like to do the Black and brown thing, so that was a semi-victory for everybody in a way. And another,
and it got him elected.
And
second term. That's why he did it.
Yeah. See, he was having to navigate the matrix. He was having to try and do stuff for us on one hand, but on the other hand, not seem like he was too threatening. Yeah. But look what came after him. When we said this on the show before, when Black folks elected a president for the first time to the United States and put all their power behind one, they gave you a statesman who was a family man, had a beautiful family, who were educated, who was scandal-free for 4 years and didn't have any scandal, any craziness, no.
And after he left too, there's been no scandal since he's done.
No, and then what happened when white folks said, "Okay, we got you. We see you. We're gonna raise you one. We're gonna give you one of ours."
The worst.
What did they give us?
They gave us the worst of theirs.
They gave us the worst of the wish.com of presidents, right? And this is like right. And that was our payback. That was our payback. One gave you hope and change, and what did the other one give us? Right? Hatred and violence, right? Like constantly.
Wish.com.
Well, okay, was that too good?
Maybe.
Maybe. Was that level like Alibaba?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Most of the stuff from Wish comes from China, so you about right. Spot on.
China. He said we heard that for 4 years, and he's making Donald J. Trump T-shirts and ties and everything out of China. Made in China, right? So we got gaslighted, and we're being
gaslighted.
We're being gaslighted as hell now. We're being told that teaching all of this and our own history and teaching about the way that America has marginalized us is divisive.
Oh, but
That's divisive.
but you know what
Racism isn't divisive.
you know what the next
White
move is?
supremacy
Embrace racism.
So,
Embrace that. Like
Yeah.
that's just
The next
it's
move,
okay.
we're in Black History Month, but
History Month, bro. You can't
All
say
right, I'm
Black
sorry.
History Month anymore.
we're in History Month.
Anti-Civil
We're in
Rights
History
Day.
Month that's focusing on Black folks, which is Black history,
You making me
Black
feel
American
uncomfortable.
history,
You're making a lot of white folks feel uncomfortable, bro.
whatever.
You making-
But by the
if
time
you go
next
to China,
February
if you go to China
yeah,
and you say, "Can I have some Chinese food?"
yeah,
In China, they're gonna laugh at you
yeah. So
because
it's gonna have some food.
It's just food.
Yeah.
We call it Chinese food.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well-
Black History Month is for.
So next year, you're not gonna be calling it Black History Month. You're not gonna be calling it No History Month because they're gonna ban that shit. CRT. They're gonna CRT it out of here.
That's true.
Right?
It's gonna be
And
called
so-
All History Month.
Listen, many places. That's exactly what
That's
they're
the- that's what the goal
experience,
is,
what
man.
they're
Yeah.
experiencing
Goal-
in school. You were talking the other day about the words that are banned. You know, forget
Yeah.
like
Oh
the
yes.
book, a
Yes.
compilation
Pull the
of
words
words.
up.
Like there are
So crazy.
specific words that are
Is
like
this in Wisconsin?
you can't use
Wisconsin.
this in schools at all.
By law,
Mm.
by law, you can't use them. They're trying to outlaw this group of words, a set of words, and I'll find it.
So, but Wisconsin is interesting because they do a lot of crazy shit. Like with
That's
the
interesting.
Republicans, and they'll do gerrymandering. They'll erase these lines in order to
And
restrict
they all
vote,
do that, right?
restrict Black people from voting. You have anti-CRT legislation. That's you're not even nobody in a now should be a push. Everybody in the inner city should be bringing in an expert in CRT and putting it in a curriculum. Now that's what should be happening.
Okay, so let's go through some of these words. This is a list of words. The government of Wisconsin, the legislature is attempting to pass a bill that would prohibit these words from school trainings and trainings of state employees.
Mhm.
It's so long, I can't say all of them, but it's things
Give us
like,
about 5.
I'll give you affinity groups, collective guilt, colorism, critical pedagogy, critical self-reflection, decentering whiteness, diversity focus, diversity training, equity, examine systems in quotation marks, free radical therapy, hegemony, identity deconstruction, institutional bias. Bro, this list just keeps going on.
Bro, these people just don't wanna feel bad.
Microaggressions, multiculturalism,
Microaggressions.
neo-segregation,
Talk about microaggressions all the
normativity,
time.
oppressor versus the oppressed, patriarchy.
Oppressor.
These are all words that they would literally
Yeah.
outlaw.
You
They
know
don't
my
want to
favorite-
feel bad about nothing.
What my favorite
And they
word
don't
was?
want us to know nothing. They don't want us to know anything about
My
anything.
favorite term was examining systems.
Oh, they don't want
Examining
you to
systems
do
in there.
Like
No.
that captures it all.
Social
does.
justice.
Yeah.
Social justice is on the list.
We will not be
Spirit
just.
murdering.
Spirit murdering, that came out of Bettina Love's
That's
book.
Bettina Love's word.
That's the guy
right?
that came out of.
Shout out Bettina Love.
They are literally trying to outlaw
Dr. Love.
knowledge.
Dr. Love, they're
Knowledge.
trying to take everything
Knowledge.
that's in your book and
You know what?
take and
I'm surprised
cancel it.
black isn't on here. You know,
It might
just like
be.
straight
It
up
might
black.
be.
Oh, and the last one, whiteness. Well, that's not the last one. Woke is the last one. Whiteness, white supremacy, white social
privilege.
capital, white privilege, white fragility, unconscious bias, systemic racism, systemic oppression, systemic bias,
Who came up with
structural
this list? Did
racism.
they come up with this list at a clean
Outlawed.
meeting?
Crack a matrix.
A whole lot of state legislators. That's exactly what you could describe them. They Klan meetings, right? Like it's yeah.
The clapper.
Where do you think they go? Where do you think they all went? They put on badges.
Yeah.
They got on ballots, and they said, "Oh no, we gonna." This is why sometimes I hear people excited like, "Oh, America's browning. Oh, we're gonna have more." I'm like, I mean, cool. I don't care. Like, who's actually, we've seen this, right? We talked about this. Like, apartheid was a minority white vote. Like, it doesn't matter to me that if America is minority white, if they are controlling how our kids are taught, how if they can breathe, easily, all of those things, and what difference does it make? We've seen plenty of places in history. These books in here have a ton of them where a minority group of people wielded all the power, whether it was South Africa, whether it is here, whether it's, at some point white folks were a minority on this continent.
And they're going to be the worst.
And there's still a minority in the world.
Exactly. So like that in itself, I think sometimes we get, celebratory about some, things that are just like, okay, like.
Well, so I do celebrate the fact that America is going to start looking more like the world in a lot of ways, and that the long historic white supremacy that has gone unchallenged globally is going to start facing pressures of browning in places where it hadn't before. That, to me, I think is worthy of somewhat of celebration and fear. The The fear is once you start taking something away from people who have seen themselves in power for the longest time is when it's the most dangerous. There's like this statistic in domestic abuse. Anyone who's worked in social services knows that the most dangerous time for a woman when she's in a domestic abusive situation is when she decides to leave.
Yeah.
So the period of time right before you decide to leave is when your oppressor actually is the most intense. They pull out all the stops.
Yeah.
All the stuff that's in them that was dangerous becomes 10 times more. They hit the button. They put it on 10 overdrive. The Browning of America will antagonize white supremacy in ways in which they will turn the knob up to 10.
I don't disagree with that at all. And I think, but that's part of like why the vigilance is so important, why the education piece is so important. Like, yo, this is not over. If you look at it as, oh, we had the civil rights battle. Oh, we won that. And so now we had this battle. Oh, we won that. And now if you look at it as a war, and look at it historically and recognize it's not white, the war of white supremacy on people, on humanity, on the planet, it's not over based off of a battle. Right, a singular battle. Right, we saw this with the liberation movements on in Africa. There was time for celebration for that too. We recognized, we saw that, and we also saw what happened during that time, and then the immediacy. Right, like, and so like all of that, I think is just so important to look at history, connect the dots, and understand what's next, what's coming next. You know, when Dr. King said, where do we go from here? Like, that's what we should be asking constantly. Browning, recognizing like, yes, the knob is going to be turned up. Oh, you made some incremental progress, and the backlash is going to be colossal, right? Like, all of that has to be.
Do you think we're prepared for the backlash, though?
Absolutely not.
As a people, are we well positioned for any type of backlash?
Are we organized?
I mean, like right now, we're talking about
organized.
We're in the foyer.
We're talking about organized? All right, good. Doing your AI. Organized. We organized.
Why y'all trying to organize against these good white people?
Did you
Why y'all
Uncle
organize?
Ruckus us?
We always Uncle Ruckus.
So it concerns me because if we look at it from what's happening in the classrooms or whatever, you got 85% of folks that are in these classrooms that are white. We talk about education on Sunday nights, Black Hands podcast, right? And then when you look at the majority of these people that are making decisions, politicians, white, right? And so regardless of if they are the minority, they still have the majority of folks.
Well, what are we doing?
Decisions.
We know what they're doing. What are we doing?
We ain't doing nothing.
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
I think some of us are doing things, but then others are just so compelled in terms of like being adjacent to white folks to where we just do whatever we can do in order to make them happy, in order for us to continue the lifestyles that we have, right? I think that more of us, like us, have to be willing to risk it all with whatever kind of violence it takes in order for us to get to where we need to get, right? Last thing that I would say would be physical violence, but just like we got to unleash the things that we need to do. We need to start campaigns in terms of like galvanizing our people to do what's in the best interest of Black folks, not just what's in the best interest of individual Black people, but what's in the best interest of the group.
Like watching my own nephew grow up on the show, just a minute ago.
You just had to bring me on Freedom Friday in order for this to happen.
Who I trust me. That's it. I was like, oh, we need to collaborate and organize with the community.
He didn't join the team now.
We need to all be together.
He didn't join. See what happens. See what
he does. Some stuff. I think it's important to highlight, like, folks who are doing it. There's and recognize like what we're doing. Like when we had the like independent Black movement, independent Black schools movement, people understood, right? And I want to also like draw a parallel to that. Like Black homeschoolers is skyrocketing, right?
Yeah.
So like there's a connection between independent Black school movement, Black charter school spaces, and homeschooling. Like that's connected in this idea, like what you were just describing of like people saying like, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? What are we doing? Those are examples of people saying like, this is what we are doing.
Yeah. So I got a large Latinx population in my school. And so, with everything kind of trying to calm down with this global pandemic, folks are traveling more to see their families and do these other things. So I got teachers that are like, well, they're missing a lot of school. I'm like, well, this kid is probably going to learn more in Spain than they do in your classroom just from taking that trip.
Yeah,
right?
Are they going to Spain or are they going to Honduras?
Well, one family's going to Spain. So a couple families going to Honduras and Central.
You have a large,
whatever. So like I have a large
Spain,
embodiment of So
large,
it's like it's like an embodiment of folks or whatever. Haitians. Everybody. I got everybody in my school. It's like a gumbo pot.
This thing you say about the homeschooling, Black homeschooling in the independent schools. First of all, I think it's the key. Number one, that we're not talking about enough. If we were talking about kind of like taking our kids out of, they're steeping like tea bags in a system that is like going to stain them with white supremacy. So taking them completely out of that and putting them into a humane, culturally affirming scenario where they are loved, where the love isn't even in doubt, like where the love is just like obvious because it's familial, is like a strategy. It's like a strategy that we need to talk about, but it's not an economic reality for everybody. There are many ways you can make that happen. But if you change the scope of what we call homeschooling to include the idea that we're all homeschoolers, even if you're sending them to school, your home is still a school, right? Of course, yeah. And not even a school, it's the first school. Even if you have to send them to the district for a few hours a day, your home is still the home school. I love that. We're all homeschoolers. We're all homeschoolers, right? And if we thought that way, it would change our pedagogy, our home pedagogy. It would change our home kind of reading list and activities or whatnot. We would all it would change the expansion. It would expand what we consider an educator to be and who is an educator and how they should be educating. It would change our relationship to them broken down, raggedy ass schools that we send them to when we do have to send them there because they're coming from, no, honey, they're coming from a school. Yeah. And they're coming to you for a few hours a day because of economic necessity, possibly in some way, shape, and form. And to the extent that you can continue what we're doing at home, we love you. To the extent that you don't and you give me more work that I have to undo, we're gonna have a problem, right? Yeah. So every Black home is a Black home school in my vision of how we expand homeschooling as a concept.
Yeah, I like that term a lot. And I think that term helps people, with a paradigm. And I think, essentially it's exactly how we look at our communities anyway, right? Like how, we know that, our multi-generational families are like they're teachers. They're teaching our children something, our aunts, our uncles, the neighbor, the community centers, the faith-based organizations. Like we look at that. And that's the whole, I think that's one of the key, conflicts with, African-centered, thinking and institution of school. Right. It's like if you come to a space and you look at this, the job is more important than the work. Yeah. Dope educators, like no matter what job I'm in, I know what the work is, and it doesn't stop at 3 p.m. My work is about Black liberation. And if that's the framing, then that's very different than what schooling is or what the job is, right? And so if we're looking at Black liberation and it's, only within the institution, but not the ecosystem, then that's different. And then also how institutions are built, they don't recognize anything outside of those walls as education. So that's an automatic, like I'm like declaring war on anything else. That's why they can look at, you're not my partner. Come here. And we talk about like Indian schools. This is like the Black Indian school, right? Like, no, come here. And what they used to say, what was that term? Like the only good Indian is a dead Indian, right? Like,
or so what's the education they said? Kill the Indian and save the man.
Exactly. That's the same philosophy.
They said that in education.
That was an educational.
That was an educational philosophy. Kill the Indian, save the man.
That's the same philosophy that's applied to Black students.
Now let me tell you, because I told you this last night. Here's my idea for some educational justice. Indians have land. They made a good deal. They made a better deal than we did with the government. They were like, we need to preserve our culture, our heritage. We need some land because everything in the world is tied to land, and land is what makes things real. And they have these things called reservations where they are semi or somewhat sovereign. They build their own schools. They have casinos. They have housing. Some do better than others. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm just saying our deal with the government was, hey, just stop beating us and make everything equal, and we'll just start fresh from here and have no justice for everything that came before this. Indians were like, nah, bro, land. We need some land. We need some. So what justice would be now is for us to go to the Indians and make a deal. Now y'all got all these acres and acres and acres and acres and acres of land, and you're sovereign. So you're like another nation. Can we do some black condos and communities and schools? Make a deal, And
What's wrong with you?
well, you don't think it would work? I mean, I know it's ambitious. It's ambitious, but before I thought, because Sharif was telling me Black Africa, the plan, back in the day was they were going to try and get for Black folks some land and some states, right? And it never came to fruition. And I'm just like, we'll make a deal with somebody else. Make a deal with somebody who already has sovereign status, is a group of color who understands cultural preservation, the need for collective economics, all that. You don't think it'll work?
I could.
Why are you anti-Indian, bro?
No.
Native American. Well, listen, I think
I'm 110 Native American.
So is everybody, bro. So is everybody. Yeah, so is everybody. Whole good hair crew.
What's that senator?
Yeah.
What's her name?
I'm 185th Indian. Really? What kind? I don't know. It's 185th. Check out my good hair. Right? That's old, bro. We don't do that.
Understood.
We don't do that.
I mean, I think
Don't be anti, bro.
I'm not.
I think part of what I'm hearing. It's a lot to unpack.
Here comes the educator.
I don't know if I want to dive all the way into it. But this idea of the Republic of New Africa and other Black Power organizations. Well, again, trying to coalesce around the issue, unite, have power of a power base, and saying like, okay, Republic of New Africa. Here's where the vast majority of Black folks are. So from Louisiana to South Carolina or something like that being, the space where we can rebuild and institute our own reconstruction and add that kind of sovereign land.
Yeah.
It's one thing. I think, how the Native Americans got placed in particular, it wasn't that much of a negotiation of like, hey, we want this. It was kind of like, y'all can't leave here, and then,
I'm not going to let you get away with that. To some extent, they had some real negotiations, though, for some of what they got. They got whooped in a lot of deals, and they had the Trail of Tears, and they got removed and moved in ways that was savage and brutal and murderous and whatnot.
Yeah, but
and at the same time, we didn't have a negotiation like they did.
I'm agreeing that our context, if we had more of that sovereign space, I think part of the brainwashing and oppression that we went through, there were a lot of, I would say even today, there are folks who might not even ride with that.
No, not at all. They want
to
stay.
What I mean? Like try to organize a group of, people who are, and again, I don't like to describe our conditions like we're defeated. I don't think we're winning, but we are defeated at the same time. So we're like, we're like in the middle, kind of like, and here and there, we're doing some things and moving forward. Like, what would it look like if people said like, nah, we are going to create this space? And again, we see it in pockets. What would it look like across state? Well, we talk about this, like those 100,000 folks say, we're actually creating our own homeschool.
That would be amazing.
That's kind of my idea, though. Really, like a small place.
Yeah.
Like especially like I'm not talking about some big plan. A small place where you can demonstrate the possibility of community building could be a start, because people just need a vision. They need to be able to see you have like space to do that sort of thing, right?
That's why space is so important. I think this is in South Philly with Universal. Like, so I think there are pockets of that, and I think we have to highlight those and then continue to double down on it.
I feel like owning the land to me keeps sticking out as, the more I read about history, it keeps sticking out as one of the major losses that we took. Yeah. But like land ownership is something that is just primary. If I could go back in time and whatnot, we got beat out of land deals all over the place. We were almost going to get land in so many times.
Yeah,
beat out, threatened, stolen.
You share
Great Migration. Even think of a Great Migration. How many people had to leave under threat of maim and murder?
What would our wealth situation, if the 40 acres and a mule had came true, what would our wealth situation difference be today?
Come on.
I mean, think about, like, enumerate the amount of acres that is. If we would have got the 40 acres each, the wealth situation, the Black wealth situation, just from that deal alone, would have been so much different than it is now.
I hope my 40 acres was in the Hamptons.
Okay,
There
see,
there we go. We just, you know,
this is why you can't invite everybody
He's
to everything.
incorrigible.
Yeah, you
He's
can't just
incorrigible.
you can't like everybody can't come to everything.
And just when I thought he was
just about to make a breakthrough.
You know what I mean?
He's about to make a
He
breakthrough.
retreated to the darkest corner.
Yeah, but you guys really touched on something important, and I want to kind of stick in this area for a while. The homeschooling piece, and just like making your home the extension of the school, as opposed to the school being an extension of the home, right? And so, thinking about just like the things that kids are learning at home. I got 4-year-old readers, right? And these kids have never came in contact with school. With school, they're learning to read at home. Right? From some of the shows you were talking about, Sesame Street, like some of these educational shows, like these kids are locked in and becoming readers without even touching school. And it's like when they get to school, they regress.
I mean, Chris used to talk about the research that shows, like, Black students were performing extremely well. You know, that once they get to school, when that, get that arrested development. It was in the homeschool communities, learning that they were thriving. And then within the confines of a situation that's not, it was never built. Most of these places were not built with the, optimal conditions for Black children in mind, right? Like, it's one thing to build a house and you have like, I wanted this, I want that, and, all your vision. I have a friend, Mike, who built his house from scratch on his parents' land, right? Like, their yard was big enough. He built a home, and when I think about it, he would talk about like the process and how they were, his family was trying to put this one. It was, and this is in right outside of Philadelphia, right? And so, historic Black suburb or mixed suburb, but a Black community within this suburb. And the family had land, and they talked about like, well, you know what, we have enough of a parcel for you to build a home, and we share the yard, right? And so just even that concept, and then they build it, and they're thinking about the vision, right? Now imagine a school or educational and a partnership between, that extends the community learning just within this framework of a building, right? Like, it's a building, but it's consistent with what the community's values and aspirations are. It's very different than building something and then say, let's add a little equity, on top of it. It's like afterthought. And we're forced to add this because it's tied to some funding or just, how we'll be perceived. So let's add a curtain. Equity is the curtain. So let's add this curtain.
Let's retrofit it for this purpose.
And we ain't gonna do it. And retrofitting sometimes can get expensive. So we ain't gonna do that because we might have to actually change the structure of this home to fit the club. So we ain't gonna do all that.
I can tear down the walls or anything.
No. We're gonna put a throw rug down from the equity.
Well, it was low bearing.
So this is where I go back to the Matrix thing, the situation, just in that the thinking that you just said and what you just presented is a step out of the Matrix. It's a step away. Like, you have to understand your conditions, understand that you're being trained and gaslighted to be subservient and to serve a position. Level of consciousness. That's a good way of putting it. So your consciousness is raising, and people of all stripes. We need a multiracial, anti-racist commitment from people from all different walks of life, white,
you just
black,
said a lot of bad words.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking the same thing. Like, you can say this in Wisconsin.
Okay, let me finish, Negroes. I'm going to get banned here, but let me just say, we need an anti-racist, multiracial commitment to raising consciousness across lines, across race, across economic lines, to get out of the Matrix. To first of all recognize what we are in. We are swimming in a sea of misinformation that trains us from day one until adulthood to be something that God never intended us to be, right? So breaking out of the Matrix means one, just saying it, putting out there, and then realizing, submerging yourselves, kind of orienting yourself into the counter information. The information that runs counter to that is the goal. And for your children, maybe to never put them in the first place, never to let them start there. The whole homeschool thing that we said, to me, is the anti-Matrix strategy for children. It's the never even put them in the Matrix, let them grow organically or as organically as you possibly can. I just want to say, I saw Sharif's daughters last night.
Yeah.
These beautiful children.
Yes.
Sharp,
Yep.
funny. I'm not going to tell one of the stories, but one of them even told me how to get around the loophole. like these are going to be people who are going to be free people. They are being raised to be free people, and you can see it, and you can hear it, like what it sounds like. And in the moments when you recognize that in a child, you see that that's what's happening with them.
You want that for every child.
Exactly.
And if we're not careful, they're gonna slap an IEP on them and say, you know what, like there's something wrrong with you.
But they're gonna take you out. I'm just gonna tell you right now. You better be just at home. That's all I can say.
Oh yeah, no, listen, they already hold me accountable in ways that I've not experienced before. Yes. Right? Like it's nothing like with a group of daughters,
yes.
You know, who are just like, no, that was then, this is now. You know what I mean? But there's a saying, I think Stickman, you know, the only a caged bird thinks flying is an illness.
Ooh.
Right. And so if we think about that, how many children are flying, you know, and then people, educators who are, you know, looking at like, nah, like there's a problem with you because you're free thinking. There's a problem with you because you're criticizing the system or analyzing the system or whatever that term was that they
sit in on one of them IEP meetings, right? Just as a bystander, sit in on IEP meeting and just hear the deficit thinking that goes into how they analyze Black and brown kids. Right? They're, I don't know, man, just the amount of Black boys that are being labeled as special education students, it's very troubling.
Because some of them might say the system is a problem. Like this is not, and that in itself, again, critiquing the system. At the end of the day, we need critical thinkers. That's at the end of the day.
Like, that's on the list. But maybe that's all too. Let me see.
But Reef, if you got 85% of folks that are teaching 60% of folks that don't look like them, can't identify with them or whatever, then you're gonna continue to get these types of outcomes.
Yeah, but it's not just who's leading the classroom, right?
Everybody.
Who's developing them? Who trained them in college? Right, and so a lot of times we let teacher prep program, educator prep, principal prep programs off. The superintendents have to get a license to be superintendent. Who developed them to think about? Hey, this is the work, not the job.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but
most people are trained for the job, not to work in a school, not work in a community. Yeah, if I'm training folks, I want them to be developing how to work in the community that they're going to, not to work in this school system and the job. Those are two very different pathways, mindset, skill set, and ultimately outcomes.
But understood. But think about this. We're talking about lack of diversity in K-12. There's also a lack of diversity in higher ed. Right? And so if they're...
And we don't talk about that as
we don't talk about that at all.
Unless we're talking about specific professors and what they're experiencing. But
right. But we need to go to these HBCUs, right? And that's where the teacher pipeline needs to begin in terms of like building connections with these HBCUs. You know, I'm reading them like Howard is the only campus that has a school on it. Like they have a charter school there.
I think there's a couple more, but
and they didn't like it.
Yeah, no, they were anti.
See, this is where your talented 10 gets into the mix.
Yeah,
they actually hated the school that they had on their own campus because they felt like the system.
I wonder if their newest professor knows that there's a charter school on the campus.
When they find out, they go crazy. But I don't know anything about this. You're gonna get canceled from that group. I don't know.
I'm not getting canceled.
You know what he's talking about? I don't know what he's talking about.
That's just a sub. I'm
Howard,
not saying nobody's
I love
name.
you, Spellman. I love you. Whatever he's talking about, he don't like Indians. He don't like HBCUs. He don't like people. I don't know. Just
but I mean, the role of the HBCU, particularly historically, was to be in that space, help connect it. Understanding that liberation is tied to education, right? And there's a very specific, like you can't separate those two, right? That's why we talk about educational justice and racial justice, or you can't extract them from each other. If you're doing one, you have to do the other, right? But then if we look at now, and this goes back to you're talking about like the legislature and all that, how many of these HBCUs, actually have class? We're talking about class action lawsuits. They have grounds for class action lawsuits, right? You look at Cheney and what they're funded as opposed to other state affiliated schools in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But then you also look at the HBCU. Like if my vision would be, if you want to be the dopest educator, in this area, you would have gone through Cheney. you'd have gone through Lincoln.
Yeah.
Right? Lincoln doesn't even have an undergrad program.
Yeah.
You know, and Cheney's, they could all the ed majors. I literally was thinking about hosting them for dinner in my house. That's how few there are.
Oh wow.
Literally, I had a conversation with them like, yo, we should bring, this was right before COVID. Yo, all 15 of y'all, I want y'all to come to dinner at our house, and so we can,
Wow,
just
your
start
house is
building
that
community.
big, huh?
It ain't that big. It's that they're that few.
All the way out in Lower Marion, huh?
Bruh, don't disrespect me like that. We don't live in no daggone Lower Marion. Lamont, bro, Lamont. And let me tell you about the community we live in. Lamont is where I still hear, I don't actually hear, but theoretically. The Civil War. This is where.
How do you theoretically hear something?
Because it's just the feeling. Like
that's an illness.
I'm looking at this Union soldier statue right out here, right? And so this is in Lamont. This is where the Black Union soldiers were trained, right? And so this is where we are, right? Like this is Lamont, Pennsylvania, is where Black soldiers who were going to, to fight in the Civil War. This is where they were trained. This is where we are, bro. You know what I mean? So between that and West Philly, baby, all day. You know what I'm saying?
All right.
Yeah,
Cut the shit.
Yeah, West Side. West is best.
Cut the shit.
Don't get me started.
Do not get him started.
So
my family from the Black Bottom, bro.
I'm with that. Now we wrapping time.
Yeah.
So yes. Go ahead, bro. So what were you gonna say?
I was going into my closing thoughts.
Okay, so we're gonna go to closing thoughts with this Freedom Friday live from Philly, live from a center of knowledge, encompassed in a living room of knowledge, right, where you are free and private to say whatever you want. What's your closing thought on this particular show that we have talked so much around Black knowledge being under attack, CRT actually being in advance of white supremacy on Black thought, and we're kind of like in a shop of Black thought right now. What's your big idea? What's your big closing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first of all, thanks to Dr. Mark Lamont Hill and his team for hosting us for today's Freedom Friday. I think situations like this, when we talk about that, I love the framing of homeschooling. That's what we all are. We're all homeschooling our students, our children, and they may go into a building for a particular time, but how are they going? Assessing, are they being undermined, and all of that? There are lessons that we're teaching undermined. And I think spaces like this, Uncle Bobbie's, Harriet's Bookstore. My mother and my Aunt Maddie used to work at Hakeem's Bookstore in West Philly. Like that was one of their jobs when they were younger, right? And so like being in those spaces, and I think about when they would talk about that, I'm like, what? That's where some of the learning, yes, from her parents, from her grandparents, aunts, but then she also was working in a bookstore, right? And so just thinking like Black bookstores, Black spaces for us to be able to protect our children, our youth, but also community and institutions of learning, and looking at it beyond what the system says is an institution of learning, and making sure that we've created institutions of learning within our communities and that are connected across communities, I think is absolutely crucial. And so I'm really grateful that we are here. And I think that's a way to think about this work and this space. So they can ban whatever they want, but if we own the out of school time, if we own our communal learning and our institutions of learning, they can ban whatever they want in their institutions. That has nothing to do with what we do, how we educate. Columnist Janice Armstrong is going to she's actually writing about this very thing in I think Sunday's paper or this weekend's paper about here's what Black families need to be doing, while all of that kind of we call it anti-CRT, but it's really just anti-Black. We're still anti-Black because this has been a long war of anti-Blackness. They just named it something different to as part of their tactics. So we got to make sure we're refining and revisiting our tactics.
Yeah,
that's deep.
Yeah, it's hard going after that. You should have let him go last. It's his hometown.
I always do this too, and I don't know why. Yeah, go ahead, bro. Like,
I'll try. So, first and foremost, I want to shout out Dr. Tiffany Flowers. She does some work in terms of book deserts and making sure that kids that are in areas that don't really receive funding get opportunities to get books in hand. So I want to shout her out. Secondly, want to shout out Dr. Cole, who's not here today, who's part of the Fearsome Foursome 8 Black Hands podcast. Shout out to that guy. I see Energy Converters over here. So shout out to him for the work that he's doing. But lastly, I want to double down and actually triple down on this homeschool thing. Thinking outside of the box in terms of like what does a curriculum look like to where it's not prescribed to like 180 days. And so when families have the opportunities to take their kids on vacations and take their kids out for other additional learning opportunities, having schools that doesn't count against them, right? Because I think that learning happens beyond just the school walls, and having the kids to have the opportunities to go out and learn and embark on new adventures and all these other things. Because when you do that and when you expose kids to like this, I'm just thinking about this dope Philly scene in terms of like what it would look for homeschooling. When you come back and you look at these standardized tests, they're being exposed to that type of language by going into these museums and going and seeing all these things that they're seeing, because that's basically who these tests are designed for. They're not racist.
The tests are not racist.
No.
Yeah, everything's racist. So my final thought on this is just I keep going back to this matrix thing that we are swimming in a sea of misinformation every day, even when we can't see it. It's like the fish in the water thing. Fish don't know that they're in water necessarily. Maybe they do. You would know better than I because you into that sort of thing, right? Yeah. I don't know what fish think or whatever, but there's a way to swim in it so much to where it's just part of your life that you don't. When Dr. King said that, his challenge was to racism, militarism, and materialism, gross materialism. Those things, for them to exist and keep going, requires you to have a level of consciousness that's below their level to be able to sell you things. We're being sold militarism, mass consumerism, the idea that our best kind of value as a citizen is the ability for us to consume products that fill up our houses but leave us empty, right? And when you make that when you have that commitment, millions of dollars of marketing, billions of dollars in marketing of ideas and militarism and race-based kind of a hierarchical thinking or whatnot, it's hard to think of how you wouldn't become what they want you to become. You're taking in all the messages. Black children, see my hat says like problem child on it, right? When we talk about, you said black boys getting ID'd for special ed and those things. I've said it before that I think the most healthy black child is the one that is disruptive and is the behavior problem. Once you figure out that the system is BS and that it wasn't made for you and that all these people have kind of counterfeit authority in your life and you start acting out, they all got, we think these kids are dumb. They're not dumb. They have figured out this is not for them. They have figured out you are not for me. None of this nonsense. All this stuff, these rules, these things you're telling me or whatnot, they're the most healthy out of the group.
The ones know you, really, you don't know me.
You don't know me, and you don't know where I come from. And you know what that voice is? That's the voice of the ancestors talking to the young person who's encountering the ships at the sea and the beach. That's what that is, right? Everybody else is so sleepy that they comply with the rules. They comply with everything. It's the non-compliant that are the most healthy. The most healthy in any system of oppression are the ones who are not compliant, the problem children. The problem child is actually the leader, the one who is leading the way. Now we problematize them and we medicate them and we put them in separate rooms and we pull them out and make it about them. We don't do that same thing when they're white though, like just with the same behavior. Let's be real about that. So if what I just said is true to me, then how do you break out of that? How do you break out of the information system that is filling your kid's head? What you just said, where you ended, Ray, is where I think it is. It's like retaking the intellectual development of your children over again, reclaiming that, and the homeschooling as a bigger thing than just like you're not in a formal school, but your home is a school. This is your primary education. I'm your primary teacher. The pedagogy is going to be determined by me. I like the way you said it. A school's not a home is not an extension of school. It's the other way around. The school is the extension of the home, right? So if I could say anything to my people and everybody else, there are books in here like How Europe Underdeveloped Africa and Civilization of Barbarism, Black Athena. I don't know if they've got the ISIS papers in here. I mean, there are so many things that to me are countercultural ideas that you can be filling yourself with that I think are the antidote. It's the cure. If there is a white supremacist Omicron that is going through your community, this right here is the vaccine for it, right? So that's what I'm going to end on, right?
I love that. You
And
said
then with violence.
counterculture instead of pop culture. Finally,
There you go.
I
There you
finally
go.
got them to agree with me.
There you go.
No, you got him to agree.
Countercultural, counter institutions, counter ideas, counter thoughts. That actually is your survival.
Y'all made
That's
for
how
each
you
other.
win. So
The revolution will be literate. Get it.
there you go.
Get it at.
There you
where
go.
do they get it at?
And 8 Black Hands Podcast. You can get this at citizenstewart.com and just go to the shop. You'll get that. This has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you were still not free, but hopefully you are freer now than you were when we started this show today. This has been one of our best shows because we're doing it live from Philly, from Uncle Bobbie's coffee shop, Black owned. Is it West Side? Is that what we're doing?
G-Town, but
Okay, Germantown.
but listen.
So the
Germantown
Oakland person says West
Germantown
Side.
is just a suburb of West Philly, so you're always
All
right. You know what I'm
right. All right, y'all. Well, so violence has been claimed this morning. We appreciate you all for watching. Please share the show with others.